What's up, Warriors fans? It's your main man, Max, here with the Warriors latest. And now that draft day is almost upon us, we got a lot to talk about in Dub Nation. Now, with the draft coming up starting tomorrow and then rounding out on Thursday with the second round, the Warriors have the 41st overall pick going into the draft, so they're not going to pick until Thursday, but they do have a lot of options going into the draft. Now, when you look at what they're looking to do, they're looking for either best player available versus positional need. And with Mike Dunleavy's recent comments, he's looking for a guy with athleticism, shooting, and versatility. And there are plenty of guys in the draft that can do that for the Warriors. And it's a need that really needs to be met if the Warriors want to win another NBA championship. Now, we all know that the Warriors are really limited with the amount of cap space and tax concerns going into free agency. So the draft is really when they're going to make a lot of their moves, whether it be through the trade market, trading up, or getting the right player at 41st overall who can immediately contribute. Now, we've all heard, you know what, the Warriors are exploring those sign and trade scenarios where they could either move up or take advantage of other cap stricken teams, give them the pick, and maybe get some other pieces that'll help the Warriors in the short term while they go after that title. Now, we've heard many rumors in terms of what's going to happen with Kuminga, but those talks aren't going to really happen until July 1st. But a good way to initiate the talks is through the draft. Maybe doing some smaller trading and getting guys that could potentially be added into a Kuminga deal should things really draw themselves out into July, into August, or worst case scenario, right before training camp starts. And I'm being honest with you, I don't want it to drag into training camp because that could be the worst thing possible. They also want to bring in a guy who can at least add to what Curry, Butler, and Draymond are doing. Somebody who really doesn't need the ball, excuse me, but can really add to the offense by being ready to go and being a stalwart defender. And another thing this could also add in the draft is they could add somebody that goes through the Santa Cruz Warriors pipeline now that they've upgraded their coaching staff down there, and maybe bring along a guy who can contribute later on in the season while also being part of the Warriors' long-term plans. Now, when we look at the prospects when it comes to the 41st excuse me, the 41st overall pick, there are a number of guys. Now, I've talked about Hanson Yang a lot, so much so that I honestly believe he should be the 41st overall pick, but I've looked at the most recent mock drafts, and he really is projected to go in the early 30s, maybe if a team wants to take a chance, late first round. I believe the most recent draft or mock draft I saw had him going at 35th overall, which is 6 picks ahead of where the Warriors are. So I can't really hold my hopes out too much that he drops to the Warriors. Warriors pick him up. They get a great 7-foot center who averages a double-double out of China, becomes an instant fan favorite with the Asian American community within the Bay Area, and next thing you know, he's the starting center going into the playoffs. Odds are that wouldn't happen, but hey, a Warriors fan can hope. But there are other guys that really can contribute both immediately and in the long term that aren't Hanson Yang. Now, the first guy that comes to mind is Kobe Bree out of Kentucky. Now, this isn't John Calipari's Kentucky, so we don't know what we're getting in regards to Kentucky prospects moving forward, as Kentucky prospects in the Calipari era were hit or miss, and then before that, you didn't really know what you were getting during the Tubby Smith era. I think the only players that I can remember coming out of Kentucky during that era were Rajon Rondo and Jody Meeks, if you remember that name. But for Kobe Bree, he's an elite catch and shoot specialist, which is something the Warriors can really use going forward because they don't need a guy who needs the ball in his hands to be effective. They need a guy who can shoot the three and be an effective defensive player. And Bree has a career average of 42% from beyond the arc. Now, that's impressive, even though I know the three-point line in college is a little further in than the three-point line in the NBA. And while that may not be great, it's something to look at. You could compare him to, say, a Duncan Robinson back when he was an elite shooting specialist instead of an albatross contract that he is right now with the Heat. And that's something the Warriors can really add and bring to the table when they go into next season. Now, another guy that they could bring in is a guy like Zion James, a physical, defensive-minded guard who's not that big since he's only 6'5", but he's got that muscle to really match up with some of those bigger players. And when you've got guys like Ant, you've got guys like SGA that are going to dominate the game, that can't be guarded by the likes of Steph, and maybe Jimmy has a few concerns because of his age, you want a guy like Zion to come in and just lock him down. I know one guy that really comes to mind when thinking of that lockdown, I guess shorter defender that could guard the best of them, is Frank Ntilikina. Now, we know he just was a complete bust when it came to being a star in this league. However, he did know how to guard the opposing best players. I remember watching him guard James Harden on multiple occasions, and he would steal the ball from him like it was taking candy from a baby. So I love the idea of the Warriors having a guy like that who could take the ball from the opposing best player, get that quick fast break, and then get an easy bucket in the lane. Now, another guy that is also from Duke is Tyrese Proctor, who's really a smart, athletic guard from Australia. And he might not slide that far because he's projected to go first round, maybe second round. But if he does, the Warriors need to jump on him because he's a guy who really has that high IQ basketball level, which is something the Warriors really cherish when it comes to their offense and their motion offense. Guys who know how to play off the ball and be effective without the ball in their hands. Now, on top of that, there's another Kentucky prospect in Justin Edwards, who's really a high athletic wing with high defensive ceilings and an improving shot. Now, the key word there is high defensive ceilings, because that's what the Warriors are all about. Yes, they are a three-point shooting team. However, they have really made their mark as a top-tier defensive team, locking down the opposing team's best player and finding ways to score from the three-point line while also attacking the basket. Now, if those guys aren't available, though I do believe they will be, they need to go either for a trade or to just get a draft and stash prospect. Because those draft and stash prospects will always, if not at least some of the time, pay off in the long term. Because you're bringing a guy in who's developing, say, at a Real Madrid, a Besiktas, a Barcelona, top-tier European teams where they come up playing with those former NBA players who are older, tougher, and play more fundamental basketball, which is what the Warriors like to do, and then come in and make an immediate impact to the team. Say you draft a guy who's playing in Europe right now, spend some time over there, and then comes in, say, not this season, but next season to contribute with Steph's championship window, and next thing you know, he becomes a starter. Now, you could also draft an older prospect, say a junior or a senior, who's ready to contribute to now, something in the Chris Duarte mold. And that would really help the Warriors in the short term, bringing an instant guy off the bench who can add to the rotation and stay in the rotation, which is essential. Because a lot of the guys who really can't make it end up in Kerr's doghouse very quickly. Now, the other thing that really presents opportunities on draft night are the draft trade scenarios. Now, there are a number of scenarios. The biggest scenario that they could offer is packaging up the 41st pick the 41st pick along with multiple future for either second round picks or maybe a single first round pick to jump into the first round, targeting teams specifically in the first round who are really cap stricken. You think of OKC, you think of Denver, you think of the Lakers. You could think even of Phoenix, even after that Kevin Durant trade. They want to maybe add some more draft capital in the future since they don't own their own first round picks. Now, another idea for a potential trade is a salary dump to sort of create opportunities in further sign and trade scenarios, like trading veterans like Gary Payton II, which is personally my favorite. I don't want to see him go, but if it helps the Warriors in the short term, I'm okay with it. Or trading Kevon Looney to, I guess, dump some more salary and then add something in the longer term. Now, another one would be combining salary and a pick to acquire a young rotation piece. Say, let's go with Nikolai Vucevic. Guys, a big guy on an expiring contract brings a lot of value in the middle, which they haven't had since Andrew Bogut or even DeMarcus Cousins were with the team, or even Zaza. They need that big guy. We all know that moving forward, but it adds to the rotation. What they can also do is swing for some of the bigger names, such as like John Collins or Kobe White. And considering those contracts, they may not have to worry about waiting until July to trade Jonathan Kuminga for such a player if they throw in, say, a pick or a future pick. Specifically for John Collins, because he is that small ball stretch big who, in a rotation of him, Kevon Looney, as well as Draymond Green, can wear down some of those bigger centers in the league, just like John Collins and Clint Capella did against Joel Embiid in 2021. That pretty much also ended Ben Simmons' career. Now, while those are less likely, it's important to lay the groundwork here because the bottom line is the Warriors need to prioritize NBA-ready contributors with size and defensive upside because we saw what happened versus the Timberwolves. They couldn't do anything against their offense, and when the Warriors were on offense, they couldn't do anything against that defense since they were lockdown defenders and they were a lot bigger. Now, they need to address those glaring needs at wing depth as well as floor spacing in any way possible, whether that be through a trade or finding an older, senior level player. And I don't mean senior as in old, I mean just as a senior in college to really contribute now. Or they could also use the 41st pick to either draft wisely, as in getting that older player, or trade it for more assets. But they need to be aggressive and also smart. You don't want to make a move for the short term that ends up hurting in 26-27. You want to look for low-cost contributors that add to Curry's final window for his final championship. And the big picture is the draft night is about building long-term sustainability while also respecting the presence. And when you're respecting the presence, you want to make sure Steph gets that final ring. Because if Steph gets that final ring, he finally has one more over LeBron. And when you could say that for LeBron, who owns LeBron the best is none other than Steph Curry. And for Warriors Latest, I'm your main man, Max, and as always, go Dubs.